In October 2019, on a random Friday, I smashed my head against the asphalt in Madrid. A bike accident left me unable to think clearly for weeks. I couldn't read a paragraph without losing it. I couldn't execute on anything for more than 5 minutes. And 6 years later, I run a 7-figure business serving clients worldwide. And this did not happen because I work harder than everybody else. It happened because I had no choice but to engineer my brain back to peak performance. And more importantly, execute tasks that build multi-million-dollar companies feel as routine as brushing my teeth. And it all hinges on the idea that the brain is trainable, systematically trainable. And that is exactly what I'm going to show you how to do. Because you already work hard. You already understand discipline. But there are specific, high leverage, crucial revenue generating tasks that you still avoid because they feel impossible. I'm talking about cold outreach, content creation, high ticket sales calls, hiring decisions, the exact tasks that would 10x your business. But every time you sit down to do them, something in your brain screams threat. So you procrastinate, you rationalize, you burn out trying to force through. And that is not a laziness or willpower problem. That is a neuroscience problem. Your amygdala, the fear center of the brain, is treating these tasks as if they were physical danger. And no amount of motivation can override a threat response. But there's a systematic way to reclassify threats as neutral, to make impossible tasks feel normal. And once you do that, everything changes. Because when you are untrained, when you're running on your brain's default settings, cold outreach or any other hard tasks feels like paralysis. You open your laptop, you stare at the screen, you feel your chest tighten, and suddenly you're reorganizing your desk or checking Slack. But when you rewire your brain, you sit down, you do the work, you don't negotiate with yourself, you just execute. And it's the same task, but with a different brain. That's what I call threat reclassification. Your emotional brain learns the task isn't dangerous, and your thinking brain gets better at staying focused. And the behavior that used to require massive willpower, that you procrastinated over months, becomes automatic. And I've trained hundreds of founders and myself through this exact process. Because once impossible tasks become routine, your business explodes. And let me give you a real case study. So a friend of mine, Carlos, came to me, I think in April 2022, making $3K a month in his 9-to-5. Extremely smart guy, he had the skills, he had the knowledge, but he couldn't execute consistently on the task that would scale his own business. He wanted to be an entrepreneur himself, but every time he tried, he would get paralyzed. He knew he needed to do outreach, but he didn't do it. His brain will flood with objection. They think I'm spamming them, this won't work, I'm nobody, I should research more. So he'd avoid it. Scroll Instagram, check Twitter, binge YouTube, lose hours to nothing. And this had been going on for 3 years, and his personal debt sat at $40K. He was stuck but unable to push through. So here's what we did. First, we identified impossible tasks, and it was obviously cold outreach. In his case, through Instagram. So we decided on 50 messages per day to his ideal clients. Second, we reprogrammed his brain. We used CBT technique, cognitive behavioral techniques, to challenge his catastrophic thinking. We used visualization to prime his nervous system before each session. And we gave him our own dashboard to track his progress in real time. The first week, he sent like 10 messages and felt anxious the entire time. By week 2, it was like 40 messages, and anxiety dropped from like 10 out of 10 to 6 out of 10. By week 4, he was consistently sending 50 messages every day, and anxiety was at 2 out of 10. And he was booking 3 to 4 calls every day. 3 months in, he was at 10K a month, and against my criteria, he quit his job. By month 7, he was consistently at 100K per month. His debt was gone. And that's because cold outreach stopped feeling like a threat and it became a routine. He became an elite operator by rewiring his brain to love the task he was avoiding. And when you rewire your brain to stay neutral and eventually love that task, there's 5 specific changes that happen. First, you stop negotiating with yourself. You go from having a 10 minutes of internal debate before you start working to actually going for it without any negotiation with yourself. Your behavior bypasses conscious deliberation entirely. Change number 2 is that you catch spirals in real time. When your brain is untrained, 2 hours in anxiety loop before you even notice when you try to do the thing. When you rewire your brain, you catch every anxiety loop within 5 minutes, you run a reset protocol, and you go hard against the task again. Change number 3 is that the same triggers do not hit you as hard. When you're untrained, let's say a client sends you a passive-aggressive email. You spike to 9 out of 10 anxiety. Once you rewire your brain, the same email gives you a 2 out of 10 anxiety. You read it, respond, move on, because you have recalibrated that threat detection. Change number 4 is that you execute even when uncertain. When you are untrained, you can't start until you have perfect clarity on the entire path. When your brain is rewired for consistent execution, you just lock in and figure it out as you go. And change number 5 is that impossible tasks feel normal. Every entrepreneur that you admire has learned how to do the impossible routine. We obviously do this for every client and it's tailored to each client, but here's the minimal viable protocol that creates neuroplastic change. We call it the ring fence session. Step number 1 obviously is to pick the most important task, the one that feels impossible, the one that you've been avoiding. Let's say that it's called outreach. Whatever would 10x your business if you just could do it consistently. Then we run a ring fence session, which is a term I invented for a specific type of time block that has this characteristic. The first characteristic is you have to mark the mission, is to define one stretch goal for the session, something that is outside of what you would normally do. Let's say send 50 cold emails, something that allows you to channel energy into throughput. Second step is to align yourself. Visualize the outcome so you understand exactly what it is that you are going to accomplish. This primes your brain for action rather than avoidance because you are diminishing the uncertainty around the task. The third thing you do is to still the mind. 2 minutes of breath work. You can do box breathing, deliberate breathing, it doesn't matter. The point is that you downregulate your sympathetic nervous system so you're not fighting a threat response. The fourth step is to time lock the work. Set a 90-minute timer, no phone, no Slack, no email, nothing except you and the task. And that time constraint creates urgency. The next step is to evaluate your progress. When the timer ends, compare the outcome versus the mission, what you wanted to do versus what you ended up doing. And finally, and this is crucial to close the dopamine loop, record the win. Log it and make sure that you use it as proof that you are in fact rewired. The third step is to do this daily to one impossible task. There's more to this method. Of course, it helps to meditate every day for 20 minutes and have a reasonable amount of sleep so the brain can consolidate changes at night. But the core mechanism is exactly what I just shared, the ring fence session. It's going to help you reclassify threats as neutral. And that is how I rebuilt my brain after a concussion. This is how I've trained 400 plus clients through it. And the ones who stick at it for 6 weeks report the same shift. What used to be impossible now is routine. What used to give them anxiety now doesn't move them at all. And that's why they succeed in business. It's not because they work harder, but because everything they do is intentionally directed towards the thing that matters most. And that starts at the level of the brain. So tell me, which task feels impossible for you right now? Comment below, be specific, and then run a ring fencing session protocol on that task once a day for 6 weeks using the master sequence, and you'll see how your life changes. If you're still paralyzed after 6 weeks, which I guarantee won't happen, you need a specialized version we use at Selfmastered. We need to really get to the bottom of your brain patterns. But try this first. I have yet to meet someone who takes me on this challenge and doesn't rewire his response to the task. Once you make the impossible feel routine, I guarantee everything else becomes easier. See you in the next video.